My phone buzzed on a quiet Thursday morning as I sipped my coffee at my desk. It was my father. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since our last phone call where he reminded me how useless my degree was and asked if I had finally considered working in retail. So I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Catherine," he said, without greeting, "your sister's wedding is next Saturday. You will be there." No question, no invitation, just a command. "And if I'm not?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. A heavy sigh. Then the punchline. "Then don't expect me to pay another cent toward your tuition." I stared at the wall. I could almost laugh if it wasn't so predictable. He didn't know. He didn't know I'd already graduated 6 months ago, summa cum laude in cybersecurity from the University of Washington. He didn't know I'd landed a job at a private fintech firm in San Francisco. He didn't know I was already making 6 figures. Because he never asked. The last time I told him I won a scholarship, he said, "That's great, but your sister just got invited to model for a bridal catalog. Isn't that exciting?" That was Allison, the golden child, the family's pride and joy, beautiful, charming, and engaged to some tech entrepreneur no one in the family could stop gushing about. And me. I was the quiet one, the awkward daughter, the one who should smile more. "I'll be there," I told him. It wasn't because of his threat. It wasn't about the money. I was going because something didn't sit right. There was something about Allison's fiancé I didn't trust. Something I couldn't explain, not yet. But when your instincts are trained to detect patterns, to sense when data doesn't match, you learn to listen. So I booked my flight, not as a guest of honor, not even as family. I was going back home as an observer. And maybe this time, the invisible one wouldn't stay silent. Growing up, I was always there but never quite seen. At school, I was the girl who finished every assignment early, who corrected the teacher's math, who made honor roll every semester. At home, none of it mattered. Not when Allison walked into a room. I remember being 12 and winning a state science competition. I came home, ribbon in hand, heart pounding with pride. My mother barely looked up from curling Allison's hair. "That's nice, Katie," she muttered. "Allison, turn your head, baby. Let's get this side just right." That same evening, the whole family gathered to celebrate Allison being picked as a backup flower girl for a cousin's wedding. They brought cake. It was always like that. Allison was sunshine. I was the shadow standing beside her. She was invited to every party. I was asked to babysit the younger cousins. She dated football players. I built apps for fun and coded late at night, headphones on, blocking out the world. Our parents never meant to be cruel, I think. They just had a very clear image of what success looked like, and it didn't wear glasses, talk about encryption, or prefer books over brunch. When Allison got engaged to Chase Miller, it was like the world finally aligned with their dreams. Tall, handsome, allegedly wealthy, a tech CEO with perfect hair and expensive shoes. My father told everyone at church. My mom printed the engagement photos and mailed them out to people who hadn't contacted us in years. And I got a text, 1 sentence. "Allison's engaged. Hope you're doing well." I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. I'd already moved out years ago, paying my own way through college, juggling late-night shifts at the campus help desk while freelancing for cybersecurity audits on weekends. They thought I was still in school. They never asked. When I received that call from Dad, it wasn't the first time he threatened to pull the plug on my education. It had been his go-to tactic since freshman year, even though I'd stopped relying on him long ago. This time it just sounded emptier. But something about Chase bothered me, the vague way he spoke on TV interviews. The fact that no one I knew in the tech world had ever heard of him. And the way he looked at Allison in their engagement photos, like she was a trophy, not a partner. I packed my bag not to be part of the show. I went home to look behind the curtain. The rehearsal dinner was held at a rooftop venue overlooking the bay. Fairy lights twinkled above us, casting everything in that expensive kind of glow design to make even tension look like elegance. I arrived exactly on time and instantly felt like an extra in someone else's movie. Everyone looked polished, glowing, loud. I slipped in quietly and made my way to the open bar. That's where I first met Chase Miller. He was taller than I expected, wearing a navy suit tailored to perfection and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He extended a hand with effortless charm. "You must be Allison's sister," he said. She said you were the brainy one. Something about the way he said it made my stomach turn. I forced a polite smile. Catherine, nice to meet you. So what are you studying? Cybersecurity, I answered, keeping it vague on purpose. Graduated a while ago. He raised an eyebrow. Impressive. I've got a team working on some blockchain integrations. Maybe we should talk shop later. I nodded but said nothing. His tone was too slick, too rehearsed. During dinner, he held court, talked about his company Miller Innovations like it was a household name, tossed around buzzwords, AI trading models, decentralized tech, private investors. He talked in circles, name-dropped CEOs I knew didn't exist, and referenced conferences that had never happened. It was like watching someone perform tech jargon for a crowd that didn't know better. And they ate it up. My father laughed at every joke. My mother beamed like she'd birthed the man herself. Even Allison looked hypnotized, hanging on every word. But I noticed other things too. How Chase always redirected attention when anyone asked specific questions. How his LinkedIn profile only had a handful of connections and no real endorsements. How none of my contacts in Silicon Valley had ever heard of his company. I'd worked long enough in the industry to know what real leadership looked like and what smoke and mirrors smelled like. So that night, back at my Airbnb, opened my laptop. Within minutes, I was running a quiet, deep dive background search on Chase Miller. Just out of curiosity, I told myself. But I already knew better. When something doesn't add up, there's usually a reason. And I was about to find out what he was hiding. By sunrise, I had everything I needed. His name wasn't Chase Miller. It was Charles M. Whitmore, at least. That's what he'd gone by in Florida 5 years ago when he scammed a widow out of her life savings. Before that, he was Christopher Miles, a luxury consultant in Nevada who disappeared 2 days before his wedding, taking $90,000 in prepaid vendor deposits with him. 3 names, 3 states, 3 women. Same face, same pattern. I stared at the screen in disbelief, even though I already knew what I was looking at. This was a serial con artist, a man who used love as leverage and weddings as getaways. And now he had his sights set on my sister. I sat on the edge of the Airbnb bed, laptop balanced on my knees, fingers frozen over the keyboard. If I told Allison, would she believe me? Would anyone? I could already hear their voices. You're just jealous. You've always had a problem with Allison being happy. This is her moment. Don't ruin it. And worst of all, you're just making this up to get attention. Because that's how it always was. When I spoke up, it was dismissed. When Allison cried, the world stopped to soothe her. But this wasn't about me. This was about protecting someone even if she'd never done the same for me. I thought back to high school, the night of Allison's Sweet 16. I had just received an offer to attend a tech camp at Stanford full scholarship. I told her, excited. She rolled her eyes and said, cool, but try not to sound so desperate. No one likes a know-it-all. I said nothing, just like I always did. But this time, silence wasn't an option. Still, I knew if I spoke up in front of everyone, if I turned the rehearsal dinner or the ceremony into a showdown, I would become the villain, the bitter sister, the saboteur. And I didn't want revenge. I wanted her to wake up before it was too late. So I decided on a different path. I wouldn't scream the truth from a microphone. I'd deliver it in silence. With facts, not drama. Proof, not accusations. I opened a new folder on my desktop and began collecting everything I'd found. I named it. For her eyes only. The morning before the wedding, the air buzzed with the kind of forced joy I'd come to expect from my family. At the venue, people bustled with last-minute changes. Flowers were being arranged. A string quartet rehearsed under a white gazebo. Someone was screaming about missing table cards. Allison floated through the chaos like a bride out of a magazine, graceful, glowing, unreachable. No one noticed me. I moved through the day like a ghost, smiling just enough to not raise questions, nodding when necessary. But while they were tying ribbons, I was tying loose ends. Back at my Airbnb, I printed every document, screenshots of fake company profiles, news clippings from past cons, even a police report from a woman in Arizona who'd filed charges under a different alias, Chase Morgan. I didn't include personal opinion, just facts. Attached to the file was a short note, typed and unsigned. This man is not who he says he is. Please read before you say I do. I have no stake in this but your safety. Search the names, check the dates. Decide for yourself. I placed everything in a plain folder and slid it into a nondescript padded envelope. I addressed it simply. To Allison Douglas Private. Urgent. Then I took a slow walk to the resort's front desk and left the envelope with the concierge, asking it to be placed in the bride's suite first thing in the morning. I didn't leave a return address. I didn't sign a name. She didn't need to know it was me. Because this wasn't about me being right. It was about her being safe. That night, I sat by the water just outside the venue, watching the waves move under the moonlight. I listened to distant laughter echo from the rehearsal after-party and tried to steady the ache in my chest. I didn't know what she would do. Maybe she'd ignore it. Maybe she'd read it and still marry him, thinking it was a cruel prank. But maybe, just maybe, she would see the truth. And that would be enough. At sunrise, I checked out of the Airbnb, rolled my suitcase quietly across the gravel lot, and called for a cab. As we drove away from the coastal town, I didn't look back. Because my part in this story was over. What happened next wasn't up to me. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. 3 days later, the headlines hit social media before the family group chat. Local tech CEO vanishes hours before lavish wedding. Bride left at the altar by mysterious entrepreneur. Wedding scandal, groom missing, investigation underway. I didn't need to read the full articles. I knew the story already. Chase Charles, whatever his real name was, had done what he always did. Disappeared. This time, though, it wasn't clean. Not with so many eyes, so much money involved, and a police file growing heavier by the hour. My phone buzzed endlessly. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Texts from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. I ignored them all. Until one came through late that night. A simple message. Was it you? It was from Allison. No punctuation, no blame, just 3 words. I stared at the screen for a long time. There was a time when a message from her could send me into a spiral, when I would have obsessed over what to say, how to prove I didn't mean harm, how to make her like me. But not anymore. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because I was at peace. She had enough information now. Enough to connect the dots. Enough to protect herself moving forward. If she needed to know the truth, she already had it. And if she needed to know it was me, she would know, in time. The next morning, I opened my laptop and deleted the folder. For her eyes only. Mission complete. Outside my apartment window, San Francisco woke up in slow hums and sun rays. I made coffee, fed my cat, and got dressed for work like it was any other day. Because for me it was. The drama wasn't mine to carry anymore. I'd left it where it belonged, behind me. 2 months passed. Summer melted into early fall, and I buried myself in work projects, meetings, late nights debugging code, and early mornings mentoring interns. The world kept moving, and I let it. Then one Thursday afternoon, I spoke at a cybersecurity summit in Manhattan. It was my first time presenting in front of an audience that large CEOs, investors, tech founders, people who actually listened. I talked about digital trust, patterns of online deception, and how emotional manipulation often goes hand in hand with financial fraud. I wasn't thinking about Chase or Allison when I wrote the talk. But maybe some part of me was. When I finished, the applause felt like thunder, not for who they thought I could be but for who I had become. As the crowd dispersed, I stepped off stage and grabbed a bottle of water from the green room table. That's when I saw her. Allison. Standing near the back of the room, out of place in a blazer and flats instead of the polished gowns I remembered. Her hair tied back, no camera, no entourage, just her. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked toward me. There was no dramatic confrontation, no tears, no rehearsed apologies. She just looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in our lives. I always thought I was the star, she said quietly. But you saved me. I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. She slipped something into my hand, a folded paper, warm from her palm. Thank you, she whispered, then turned and walked away. I watched her disappear into the crowd. Later, in the car, I unfolded the note. It was the envelope I'd sent her, the one I'd labeled private, urgent. On the back, in her handwriting, just 3 words. I believe you. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt still. Not vindicated. Not victorious. Just whole. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't about making others pay. It's about becoming someone they never saw coming and never again ignoring yourself in the process. Back in my apartment that evening, I opened the small wooden box I kept tucked away in the back of my closet. Inside was an old photo of me and my mom taken at a local science fair when I was 10. I was holding a blue ribbon, missing a front tooth, grinning like I'd just conquered the world. She'd written on the back, "Don't wait for them to see you. Know who you are." I placed the photo on my bookshelf next to my framed degree and the invitation from the summit. And then I sat down and began writing in the journal I hadn't touched in years. No rage, no gloating, just truth. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't scream my story across rooftops. I just walked forward while others stayed stuck. And in doing so, I became undeniable. The next day, I woke up with a quiet certainty I hadn't felt in years. I didn't need my family to rewrite our past. I didn't need their approval to validate my path. Because in the end, I told the truth. And the truth stood. Not with volume, but with strength. Not for revenge, but for peace. Have you ever kept quiet to keep the peace until you realized the cost was too high? Catherine didn't raise her voice. She raised the truth. If you've ever stood alone with nothing but your instincts and your integrity, know this. You are not weak. You are not invisible. You are the kind of strong that doesn't need an audience to be real. If her story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. Let's remind the quiet ones out there they're never truly alone.